Harold Jenkins was marked for his appearance at a luxury car dealership, a place where whispers followed him like shadows. He left that day humiliated, but what no one expected was his return the very next day, not as a buyer, but as the new boss. What unfolded next would make you question everything about assumptions and respect. It was a bright Monday morning in Birmingham, Alabama, when Harold Jenkins, in his well-worn cardigan and fedora, stepped out of his modest sedan. The upscale dealership loomed ahead like a fortress of shiny promises, its glass doors reflecting the sunlight as if daring him to enter. For months, Harold had dreamed of owning one specific car, an elegant symbol of triumph, earned through years of sacrifice and quiet determination. Today was the day he could finally make it his. As Harold entered the showroom, the sudden rush of cold air didn't just stem from the air conditioning. It was the chill of judgment. The sales staff fell silent, their eyes sweeping over him, assessing the worn fabric of his cardigan and the slight wrinkles of his trousers. His presence was like a ripple in a still pond, unwanted, jarring. The buzz of conversation quickly shifted to hushed whispers, the kind that stung even before he could fully understand them. A muted chuckle here, a glance there, Harold could feel their judgments without needing to hear the words. "Good morning," he said, his voice calm and steady, addressing the nearest salesman. Kevin, sharp in his suit, barely concealed the smirk on his face. "Morning, sir. How can we help you today?" His voice was dripping with doubt, and the skepticism was unmistakable. Harold's gaze never wavered. "I'd like to take a closer look at the 2024 Genesis G90, he said, pointing to the sleek black sedan displayed under the showroom lights, a beauty that seemed to gleam with promise. Kevin raised an eyebrow, his voice laced with a hint of amusement. "That's quite the car. Are you sure you're looking for something like that?" "I'm sure," Harold replied, his words unwavering, his confidence a quiet storm beneath the surface. Another salesman, sensing an opportunity to entertain, joined in. With a mischievous grin, he nudged Kevin, whispering loud enough for Harold to hear, "Maybe he's just window shopping. Happens all the time." The words were sharp and dismissive, but Harold held his ground. His posture straightened, his resolve hardening. He didn't flinch. The chuckles continued, louder this time, as Harold asked about the price. $80,000, Kevin drawled, as though he were speaking to someone who couldn't comprehend. "That's where we start, sir." Harold nodded, mentally noting the figure, his hand gently running along the smooth, polished surface of the car. The muttered words from behind him struck his ears like cold water. "Maybe next time, sir." The laughter echoed in his mind as he left the showroom. But there was no fury in his step, only a calm, unshakable determination. He paused for a moment outside the dealership, glancing back with a gaze that held no bitterness, only the quiet promise of something to come. He adjusted his fedora, climbed back into his car, and drove away, not with anger, but with a purpose. This wasn't the end of the story. It was just the beginning. Harold Jenkins wasn't just another 65-year-old man in a cardigan. His life was a testament to quiet endurance and an unrelenting will. Born in Selma, Alabama, Harold had lived through some of the most tumultuous years of the civil rights movement. Raised by factory-working parents who instilled in him the value of dignity, Harold had spent over 3 decades as a history teacher in public schools. He wasn't the type to merely teach dates and battles, he brought history to life, weaving stories of resilience and respect that his students cherished. But despite his influence in the classroom, Harold's financial life had never been easy. The schools were underfunded, and his paycheck was modest at best. Yet Harold wasn't one to indulge in fleeting luxuries. While others splurged, he invested, quietly, wisely. Stocks, bonds, real estate, his savings grew steadily, a quiet accumulation of foresight and patience. After retiring, he found fulfillment in volunteering and mentoring the younger men in his community. But there was always one dream that he held close to his heart. A goal that seemed as unreachable as the stars. He wanted to own something that wasn't just a car. It was a symbol, a testament to the years he'd spent defying expectations, carving his own path in a world that often saw him as less than. And it was a dream that came into sharp focus when he first saw the luxury sedan in a car magazine. It wasn't about vanity. Harold didn't need to prove anything to anyone. The car represented success on his own terms. A reward for the discipline he'd lived by all these years. But even as he prepared to buy that car, Harold knew the dealership had treated him like a joke. It was a reminder of the world's assumptions about him. But Harold didn't let the humiliation consume him. Instead, he saw it as the catalyst for a bigger move. A chance to rewrite the narrative. To show the world, show them all, that respect is earned, not assumed. That evening, Harold sat at his kitchen table, a cup of chamomile tea in hand, as he meticulously reviewed his finances. The dealership he'd visited wasn't just a car lot, it was a small regional chain, and its owner had been looking to retire. Harold had seen the listing months ago, dismissing it at the time. But now? It seemed like fate had intervened. With quiet resolve, he picked up the phone and dialed his financial advisor. The wheels of change were in motion, and they wouldn't stop until Harold Jenkins owned not just a car, but a new future, one where he would no longer be dismissed as just another customer. Harold wasn't buying a car. He was buying the chance to rewrite how people saw him and how they would see others like him in the future. The next morning, the dealership hummed with its usual activity. Salesmen gathered around the coffee machine, swapping stories and chuckling at the eccentric customers they'd encountered over the years. Kevin, still basking in the afterglow of the previous day's encounter with Harold, retold the story with relish. "Did you see the guy yesterday?" he laughed, stirring his coffee. "He was practically ready to take out a loan just to sit in that car. Almost felt bad for him." "Almost." Another salesman added, "You're nicer than me. I would have told him to check out the used car lot down the road." Their laughter was loud and unrestrained, mocking Harold with no second thought. To them, he was just another out-of-place customer, someone who didn't belong in their world of polished shoes and tailored suits. But they had no idea what was coming. Harold sat at the table with his attorney, carefully reviewing the final paperwork. The owner of the dealership, a man in his early 70s, had been eager to sell. The deal had been finalized with unexpected speed, and by lunchtime, Harold found himself the new owner of the very dealership where, less than a day ago, he had been ridiculed. He couldn't help but feel the irony wash over him. The memory of Kevin and the others laughing at him still lingered, but Harold wasn't a man who held grudges. This, however, was different. This time, it wasn't about vengeance, it was about teaching a lesson they wouldn't soon forget. Later that afternoon, Harold walked into the dealership, but this time, he didn't take the main entrance. Instead, he made his way straight to the manager's office. The general manager, Brian, a sharply dressed man, greeted Harold with the same air of superiority Kevin had shown the day before. "Mr. Jenkins," Brian said, his tone dripping with condescension. "Are you here for another look at the G90? Harold remained unfazed, a calm smile on his face. "Not exactly," he replied. "I believe you'll want to gather the staff for a meeting. I have some news to share." Brian frowned, clearly confused but obliged nonetheless. Within minutes, the sales team gathered in the showroom. The air, once filled with laughter, had gone completely still, replaced by hushed whispers as they spotted Harold standing at the front. Kevin leaned over to another salesman and muttered, "What's he doing here?" Harold waited for the room to fall silent, his gaze sweeping over the staff. He paused briefly on Kevin, whose confident smirk had now disappeared. Then, with deliberate calm, he spoke. "Good afternoon. My name is Harold Jenkins. As of today, I'm the new owner of this dealership." The shock was immediate. Gasps rippled through the room, and Kevin's face turned a deep shade of red. Harold stood firm, letting the weight of his words settle in the air. For a moment, the silence was so thick you could almost hear a pin drop. But Harold wasn't done. He had more to say, words that would force them to reconsider every assumption they'd ever made. The silence that followed was deafening. Harold let it linger, watching the stunned expressions before him. Brian, the general manager, was the first to speak, his voice flustered. "Wait, what? You bought the dealership?" "That's correct," Harold replied, his voice steady and unwavering. "I finalized the deal this morning. I'm not here to gloat or embarrass anyone, but we need to talk about how we treat people who walk through those doors." Kevin shifted uncomfortably, glancing around as if looking for an escape. The rest of the sales team avoided Harold's gaze, their earlier confidence replaced by unease. Harold took a step forward, his hands clasped behind his back. "Yesterday, I came in here as a potential customer, someone genuinely interested in buying a car. What I encountered wasn't professionalism or respect, it was mockery. Assumptions were made about me, not based on what I said or did, but how I looked." The room fell silent again, the weight of his words pressing down on everyone. Harold's tone softened, but his resolve remained unshaken. "I've lived a long life. I've seen a lot. And let me tell you, this kind of behavior doesn't just harm your business, it reflects poorly on who you are as individuals." Brian attempted to interject, his voice flustered. "Mr. Jenkins, I assure you this isn't how we typically operate. Yesterday was an anomaly." Harold raised his hand to stop him. "I'm not here to argue or hear excuses. What I want is change. Effective immediately, this dealership will adopt new standards that reflect integrity, respect, and professionalism. Everyone, regardless of their appearance, deserves to be treated with dignity when they walk through those doors." Kevin, still visibly shaken, mumbled, "I didn't mean anything by it. It was just a joke." Harold turned his gaze to him, unwavering. "What's a joke to you can cut deeply for someone else. I hope you'll think about that moving forward." The words hung in the air, heavy with truth. Harold continued, "Now, I'm not here to clean house. I believe people can learn and grow. But let me be clear, if this behavior continues, there will be consequences." The tension in the room was palpable, but Harold wasn't angry. His voice carried the calm authority of someone who had spent decades guiding young minds, someone who understood that change came through teaching, not tearing others down. After a brief pause, he added, "Tomorrow, we'll have a proper meeting to discuss my expectations and the vision for this dealership moving forward. Until then, I'd like you all to think about the kind of environment we want to create here, not just for our customers, but for each other." With that, Harold left the room, leaving behind more than just instructions. He left them with a mirror to reflect on their actions. As Harold walked out of the meeting, the air seemed to grow heavier with the tension he had left in his wake. Back in the manager's office, Brian sat in stunned silence, while Kevin slumped in his chair, avoiding the eyes of his colleagues. The sales team wasn't just embarrassed, they were shaken. None of them had seen this coming, and the humbling realization hit hard. That evening, Harold returned home to his quiet neighborhood. He sank into his favorite armchair, sipping a cup of tea. He wasn't one to revel in victory, but this moment carried a special satisfaction. It wasn't about the money or the title. He had lived comfortably before all this, and he would continue to do so. This was about principle. It was about standing tall in the face of condescension and showing others that dignity couldn't be bought or sold. The next morning, Harold arrived early at the dealership. He greeted the receptionist with a warm smile and a cheerful good morning. Her hesitant smile betrayed her nervousness, but Harold's kindness was disarming. He wanted to make it clear that while he demanded respect, he wouldn't rule through fear. At 9 a.m. sharp, the entire staff gathered in the conference room for the promised meeting. This time, Harold stood at the head of the table, a position that now felt rightfully his. The tension from the previous day still lingered, but it was softened by curiosity. What kind of leader would Harold be? Harold began, looking around the room. "I want to thank you all for being here. I know yesterday was a surprise, and I'm sure you have questions about what's next." He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. Harold's voice cut through the still air, steady but firm. "Let me be clear. I'm not here to disrupt your lives," he said, his gaze sweeping across the room. "I know many of you have families to support, careers you've worked tirelessly to build. My goal, however, is simple. I want to create an environment where everyone, staff and customers alike, feels valued. Kevin, still visibly uneasy, shifted in his seat, his discomfort palpable. Harold's eyes briefly met his, and with the smallest of nods, he silently communicated, "You're part of this now." Harold paused for a moment, letting his words settle in. "Now, let's talk about where we're headed." His tone was resolute, unyielding. "This dealership is more than just a business. It's a representation of our community. People don't walk through those doors simply to buy cars. They come for trust, for respect, for service." He paused again, letting those words hang in the air, allowing the truth to sink in. "And that's what we'll prioritize moving forward." He outlined his plans with precision. Training programs on customer service, workplace diversity, and culture. This dealership, Harold declared, will also introduce community outreach programs, free car maintenance workshops for underprivileged families, sponsorship for local events. "This is about more than profit, it's about being a pillar in this community." His vision was clear. He wasn't just here to make money, he was here to make a difference. The staff listened intently, the skepticism that had initially clouded their expression starting to melt away. Harold's sincerity shone through, and in that moment, the room began to feel lighter. There was still nervous energy, of course, but hope was beginning to replace it. This wasn't about punishment, it was about growth. Personal growth. Team growth. As Harold turned to leave the room, the air shifted, almost imperceptibly. It was as if respect had been planted firmly in the soil, the beginning of something better, something new. Over the next few weeks, change started to take root. The standards Harold had set weren't merely rules to follow, they were the foundation of a new culture. It wasn't easy. Some of the staff found it difficult to adapt, and a few even left. But for those who remained, Harold became a silent source of inspiration. Kevin, in particular, found himself reflecting deeply on everything that had transpired. The shame gnawed at him. Yet Harold never singled him out, never berated him. He treated Kevin the same as everyone else, firm, but fair. One afternoon, Kevin hesitated outside Harold's office door. His nervous energy was visible, and the tension in his posture spoke volumes. After a long breath, he knocked softly. "Come in, Kevin," Harold called from inside. The door creaked open, and Kevin stepped inside, wringing his hands nervously. "Mr. Jenkins," he began, his voice barely above a whisper, "I just wanted to apologize. The way I acted when you first came in, it was wrong. And I've been thinking about it a lot." Harold leaned back in his chair, his gaze thoughtful. "Apologies are a good start, Kevin," he said, his tone even. "But real change, that comes from what you do moving forward. You've got potential. You just need to use it wisely." Kevin nodded, a soft expression of gratitude overtaking his features. "Thank you, Mr. Jenkins. I will do better." And he did. Over time, Kevin transformed. He became one of the most respected members of the team, known for his genuine care and professionalism with customers. The transformation wasn't just in his actions, it was a reflection of Harold's belief in second chances. The dealership's reputation skyrocketed. It was no longer just about the cars, it was about exceptional service. Customers who had once felt intimidated by the sleek, high-end environment now felt welcomed. Harold made sure of that, often greeting customers himself, setting the tone for the entire team. Word spread. Sales climbed steadily. But Harold's proudest moment wasn't marked by profits or accolades, it came one Saturday morning. A young man, no older than 20, walked in wearing scuffed sneakers and a worn hoodie. He paused near the entrance, his eyes scanning the rows of pristine vehicles. He hesitated, unsure of how he might be received. Before anyone could make assumptions, Kevin was there. He stepped forward with a warm smile. "Welcome," he said, his voice genuine. "How can I help you today?" The young man visibly relaxed, the tension melting away. Harold, watching the interaction from a distance, allowed himself a small, quiet smile. It was a brief moment, but it encapsulated everything he had worked for. In that one exchange, Harold saw the fruits of his labor, the change that had taken root in this place. As the dealership flourished, Harold became a respected figure in the community. No longer just a retired teacher, he was a mentor, a leader, a symbol of perseverance and integrity. He never sought recognition, never craved applause. His journey from being mocked in a showroom to owning the very dealership was not just a personal victory, it was a testament to standing tall in the face of disrespect and showing others that dignity couldn't be bought or sold. For Harold, the dealership was never just a business. It was a symbol of transformation. He proved that no matter how others see you, your worth is defined by your actions and character. The laughter he had once faced was now replaced by admiration, not because he sought revenge, but because he turned the moment into a powerful lesson. The staff learned that assumptions based on appearances could be not only misleading but also harmful. Customers learned they could walk into a place where respect and dignity were at the heart of every interaction. And Harold? He proved that it's never too late to make a difference. So, what's the lesson here? It's simple. Treat everyone you meet with respect, regardless of who they are or where they come from. You never know the battles they've fought or the triumphs they've achieved. More importantly, never let someone else's judgment define your worth. As Harold often said to his staff, a person's value isn't written on their clothes or their wallet. It's written in how they carry themselves and how they treat others. If this story resonated with you, take its lesson to heart. And if you want to hear more stories like Harold's, remember to like, share, and subscribe. Together, we can remind the world of the values that truly matter.